Okay, so as a start, as we've been doing recently, just come into your standing posture. So feet hip width apart, toes pointing forwards. Just thinking about the details of this. Hip width could be measured from the outside of your foot, and you can see there, slightly narrower than I normally stand, or sort of midpoint in your foot, or from the inside of your foot, which is my preference. You don't want them right out here or too close together. And the way to think of this is that what we've got are more or less parallel lines coming up through our body: feet, hips, ankles. And a third line we imagine from the crown of our head down through the middle of the body, the midline of the body. And this starts to give us a degree of the framework that we're working in. We're not necessarily stuck in that, but it's a way of orientating ourselves internally as much as anything else. From the side, when your weight comes forward and the hips drop back, so that same midline now, actually midline might not be the right term at this point, but the crown of the head down through the middle of your body and into the ground, landing more or less just behind the ball of each foot, but obviously in between each foot. So these ideas that we could add other lines as well. You can make it quite detailed. But if you think of a map, most maps will have these square grids on them. They don't exist in reality, but they are very useful for helping us to work out where we are, if you like, and how, which direction we go in. They give us again this framework. So the basic posture contains within it the qualities of body and mind, the stillness, the spaciousness, the strength even that we begin to associate with the heart of all of these practices. Your legs are clearly doing the lion's share of supporting the weight of your body. And you want to try and make sure, come a little bit closer so you can see a bit better. When my hips drop, there's this little curve through my knees, curve through the ankles. So joints are quite soft. And again, it's quite spacious. The joints are the spaces between bones. And this is not a strict anatomical description, but if you think of that space being enclosed by a capsule, then what we want that capsule is things like the muscles associated with the joint, tendons, ligaments, fascia, those other things that perhaps that's sort of almost like a bubble within which the joint itself and the synovial fluid are held. But when we talk about strengthening the joints, it's really the capsule that we're trying to strengthen. And this posture will definitely condition muscles of your legs to strengthen that capsule. It's also tendons and ligaments and so on. Then when we come to the upper part of our body, what we actually have is a divide between what we think of as front and back. Our back, and that includes our spine, the stronger part of the body, holding us upright. It would be regarded as the yang part of the body. Front of the body, belly, solar plexus, chest, ribs, shoulders, and so on, hanging slightly. Really, what we're doing is adjusting a kind of very ancient structure for mammals, which is mostly horizontal, and so most of the spine would be fairly horizontal with all the internal organs and structures hanging from that. When we come to the upright, if we get too tight in the front of the body, and pull the belly in, or we tighten the chest or something like that, we're actually squeezing in on the internal organs and tissue. And again, that would restrict the space for movement. And also, in terms of support, we can think of particularly the upper body, but also the legs, a sort of sense of flowing inwards towards that midline, which would include the spine now, and the skeleton of the body, transmitting the weight of our body downwards through our legs, through our feet, into the ground, and this gives us a more stable stance. This is the rooting down. So this is a valuable posture because it establishes some of the things that we're looking to maintain through the whole of the practice, which is quite challenging. And we see that if you think about this area between hips and waist, and you start to turn there, this will move your shoulders and your arms. You may find a little movement in your legs. Try and keep that to a minimum. Try and take that movement in your legs to a minimum. But even so, as we start to turn, we lose some of those qualities of what we refer to in Tai Chi sometimes as central equilibrium. So now we want to think about how we're moving. Quality of the movement, the flow, is obviously a big feature of Tai Chi, but it's an outcome of, first of all, this posture that I've just described and the qualities of that posture, but also how we initiate movement, where that movement comes from. And in this instance, we're not particularly using the weight at the moment, although later we will. It's the center part of the body. I turn to my right, my arms are came round to the right. I turn to my left, and so on. So in terms of the focus of our attention, this area, sometimes referred to as the lower Dantian. Dantian means field of energy, something like that. In terms of the focus, we are strongly focused in this area, and there's a kind of two-way interaction between, if you like, our brain, and we often think of our brain as the seat of the mind, and this central part of the body. This is said to control the movements, to direct the movements, and this is where we focus our attention through. One of the images I quite like for that original posture is that it's a place to stand and observe from. One of my early teachers used to talk about standing on a hill, looking out over the valley. And in a sense, you could say that we could take that even more specific, that here is where we let our attention rest. And so, because it's at the center of the body, it's sometimes described as being like the hub of a wheel. If you've got a bicycle, the hub of the wheel remains still while the wheel moves around it. So we begin to associate this central part of the body with a quality of stillness. So one thing we can begin to build in and begin to take away with us is when we're looking for that quietness, that stillness, be an elusive factor, and especially at this time of year, you're busy, maybe you've got family over the Christmas or whatever, we all have a list of things to do. It can be useful to get used to bringing your attention back to a particular part of your body that represents just that moment of stillness. And the center part of the body, really from there down to the ground, are the sources of that. And the more we bring our attention back, the more we find ourselves able to do that, because as well as training muscles and so on and so forth, we are also having an effect on the nervous system in these practices. So this, for me, is one of the great outcomes, one of the great benefits of the art. And in many ways, the foundation benefit is quality is referred to as the stillness within the movement. And this is not an idea that gives us two separate things. It's stillness within the movement. So one of the things I think that is interesting about Tai Chi and indeed the whole kind of, in a way, philosophical, practical background is that rather than seeing things in kind of black and white, there, one thing over there, one thing over there, it sees a lot of these things as two sides of the same coin. Arms are very loose and maybe just aware. Some of you will have heard me say this before, but aware of the quality of movement, the big muscles of your arms, biceps, triceps, radial muscle. Those arms are attached to each end to the bones, but in between, there should be a sense of space, once again, between the muscles and the bones, so that the feeling as your arms are moved by the center of the body increases. You're increasingly aware of this slight sense of a pull. It reminds me a little bit of if you're carrying up one of those helium balloons on a piece of string. It doesn't resist the movement. You know, they're not hard to move around, but when you pull it, there's a slight pull back. And this means that we're starting to get a sense of the movement, the energy, we like to think of it like that, permeating down through the body. So this one exercise really carries with it a great deal of almost information, really, and a great deal of sensation and awareness that ideally we will maintain as we go through the different movements. Of course, it can be quite challenging. And that sense of the big muscles of the body beginning to soften in that way, eventually is something we want to feel all the way through our body. But now, try not to lose that. And again, this is quite tricky. Just raise your arms as well. Don't have your hands too high, or they're just projecting out. Elbows are hanging down. Okay, and then just drop your hands down. Now, turn one foot out, put the other foot in front, keep the width of your step, and just begin to move your weight from one foot to another, and let your body turn. Doesn't matter which way it turns at the moment, as long as it's turning. So now we bring in another factor, another aspect of the movement, which is this movement of our weight from one leg to another. It's a good exercise for the legs, good for the knees. Don't go too far. You're going to about 60% of your weight forwards, only up to about 70 back, maybe not even that far. But quite a smooth little movement. And so we get this connection between the center of our body and our feet and our legs and our weight distribution. So again, going back to how we initiate movement in Tai Chi, where we look to for the source of the movement, it's not in the arms, it's not in our shoulders. And that's quite tricky because obviously that's going to be the most visible part. But a transfer of the weight from one foot to another, an appropriate turn in the center of our body can make a huge difference here. So particularly if a movement looks complicated, we can look to those simple threads running through the whole practice. And it's quite difficult to maintain an awareness of what's going on in our feet and our legs because we're very orientated towards these things, our arms and our hands. So again, we look to continually, regularly bring our attention back to not just the center now, but legs and feet and where the weight is. And again, that helps to train the nervous system. And again, it can become a kind of reference point. So these are things that are really basic and fundamental to our posture, but which also carry with them strong elements of the meditational elements of these arts. Now, have your other foot forwards. All of these faster exercises can carry with them a rhythmic quality. And that's an interesting one, because one of the qualities I think that we begin to get in Tai Chi is a sense of connection through the body. When one part of our body is in motion, the whole body is in motion. And we can see that in different ways. You move your weight, you turn your center, that affects your shoulders, for instance. But also, again, that sense of the movement permeating, and even as far as the bones of our body. So the sense of the movement itself, the energy, just spreads through the whole body as one unit. Like if I take this water bottle, it's full of water, even though you can't see it, and I were to press in at the bottom here, if I had the appropriate equipment, I could measure the effect of that in the top of the bottle, or vice versa. So again, underline these are is this sense of connection, and I think that's true for both mind and body. A sense of collecting yourself, and again, you know, this is a time of year where we can lose that sense of connection with good reason. You're not often, where with friends, family, or whatever. But we don't want to be totally out there, scattered around. It's good to come back into yourself and then just shake out. Spend a little bit more time on those, because actually I think that they are really valuable exercises. And what we can start to get from them is a sense of what we can get from the whole practice. So even if you can't remember the exercises, or you just don't want to spend sort of like an hour or something like that, just doing 10 minutes of that, there's a little aerobic quality to them and things like that. It can just bring you back. It can ground you. It can center you. Now, coming back to the parallel posture, and begin to let your hips sink back a little bit more and push up. So gravity pulls your hips down, and at a certain point, you'll feel that your legs start to push you up. So again, we have a movement pervading the whole of the body, because my hips are going down, it takes my shoulders down, that moves my arms. The first stage of the movement, the downward movement, is really our body yielding to the pull of gravity. Yielding is not the same as giving way. Yielding is a deliberate act, really. I mentioned the idea, the weight is slightly forward. You're directing the movement down through your legs into your feet, rather than sort of like being pulled forwards or backwards. And again, if I come closer, and if I exaggerate, if you look at this part of my body, buttocks, hips, so on and so forth, as I sink down, you probably can't see it very well, but there's a sense of adjustment there. The pelvis will gently tuck under of its own accord. If it doesn't do that, if I sink down and I'm, say, tight in my back and my pelvis doesn't adjust, then I fall over, as I just did. So again, we get a sense of the significance of this center part of the body as a point of focus, and as a way of directing movement, and directing the movement down into our feet. This has a very practical aspect in terms of our mobility and our stability. It's all connected with the idea of rooting down. So we don't want to lose that, but we do want to bring our arms into the movement as though we're cradling the ball, and then just pushing up and So I call this exercise rooting down because it really emphasizes this drop of the center of gravity that we look for. Our body expanding, contracting. There is a rhythm here, just as in the faster exercises. But you might not find that easily. A slow rhythm is always more difficult to recognize, I think. Get glimpses of it. As you get more experience, you'll notice it more. So there's still that sense of a connection in the body. Using the same movement, the same connection in the hips, just changing the arms, pushing out. And then so this is the movement, the wild goose. And here we start to recognize the significance of the imagery that we often use in Tai Chi and how that imagery interacts with our body. The image of the bird offers us all that. Smoothness of movement, grace of movement, for instance. And then Heart in the Clouds. Fingers describing a gentle circle, as though you were just painting a circle on the wall in front of you. A little bit more expansive than the previous exercises, but not a stretch. Notice that my elbows are still bent and so on, moving just as far as you're comfortable moving. Nothing should be forced in these arts. We cultivate these movements. When you cultivate a plant, you don't force it to do anything. Now changing again, this time expanding on one on one side, pushing your arm up. So you're going to pluck an apple off a tree. This is dragon plucks the stars from the sky. One more time. Always moving just as far as you're comfortable, trying to sustain that spacious quality we felt earlier in the body. Keep your hips sinking back, but bring your hands to your side. So hips don't go up and down, they just rest back, pushing up. Bring the lengthening of your back, and then bring your hands back down to that center, the lower down chin. They come up again, you push out a little bit to the side, and as you do that, you turn in the center, and that changes the direction of your arms and back. Do the same thing in the other direction. And back, and then facing forwards and push out. Notice again that my hips are still hanging back. So it feels as though buttocks, hips, lower back are overhanging slightly. Again, pushing in full direction. Movement that really does bring us back regularly to an awareness of the center part of the body, its significance, the stillness that we find there just for a moment. One more round of this. And then let your hands drop down, and this time expansion pushes out through the side of one side again, swinging your hand up so it's in line with that center line, and then straight down. And then, if it's comfortable, again, you turn. When your hand pushes out, imagine you're standing beneath the archway of an old church door or something, just sliding the palm of your hand around it. Change sides, see how that feels on the other side. We often begin to notice a difference between one side of our body and another. Again, if it's comfortable, add in the turn. Never strain. One of the principles of movement that we want to try and develop is the idea of finding the path of least resistance, like water flowing down a hill, flowing around the obstructions, through the cracks in the rocks and so on. Now, let your arms hang down both sides. Go back to this. As I said, the pelvis tucks under here, does it quite naturally, but it remains more or less level. The next two exercises, we deliberately change that. And so as I sink down, I push my hips back. Notice what that does to my head and shoulders. And then I let my hips drop down. I let gravity pull my hips down. And again, notice how my head and shoulders come up. So we move towards that more horizontal position. But when we come to the upright, we don't strain in our shoulders and our back. We let gravity pull the hips down and do the work of bringing ourselves upright. Now, it doesn't have to be a big movement. I'm doing this quite big so you can hopefully see how that mechanism works. Be careful of your back and your knees. It is a strong movement. We're going to use this in two exercises. First is called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Arms simply following. Side, again, hips go back. There's always a temptation to initiate the movement, to focus our attention up here in our shoulders and our arms. Our response is always the same in Tai Chi. We learn to bring our attention back. One more time. And then hands resting in front of your hips. Turn horizontally first, and then push your hips back. Turn horizontally again, and let the hips sink down. And that will send your arms around in the circle in an exercise we call polishing the table. Or you could imagine rolling a big ball around. Another image that I've come across with this exercise, if you imagine you're standing in water up to the height of your hips, palms of your hands are resting on the water, and you're just sliding them across the surface. So we can use different ideas and different images to help us build movements, reinforce this mind-body connection. One more time. Start to pay particular attention to the way your hips drop back and how that brings you to the upright position. So we arrive back in this central position once again. Arms hanging down by our sides. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Shake out. Good. So we take a basic idea, if you like, or basic feeling, and we try and extend that out. This is a very difficult process, and it's part of the ongoing practice and cultivation of Tai Chi. Nobody will keep those qualities the whole time, but built into this idea, built into this system, is the dynamic of returning. Like when the hands go out, we come back. So over a period of time, with the practice of these arts, you do get used to every now and then it becomes quite automatic, really, a sense of just settling before you go somewhere. So this stiller, calmer quality isn't an alternative to the dynamic quality of Tai Chi, but rather something that is seen as a kind of integral part of it. And so it becomes a more integral part of our lives. And again, I think this really is one of the great benefits for mind and body that we get from the practice. So now, from this position, let's once again take a step forward. A little bit more detail on this posture. You turn one foot out. This is an angle that you can play about with. And you step straight forward. So I step maintaining the width of the step. And the toes there point straight ahead, not slightly out to the side. So it's quite a precise posture. And this is true for all of Tai Chi. Think of your body in this sense as the vessel that the movement works through. So in the same way as if you have a bike or a car, you put energy into the vehicle, or you put petrol in, or you're pedaling, or whatever. You need the mechanics of the vehicle in good order for maximum effectiveness. The length of the step is just enough so that you can get a distinction between the weight. Not too long, this becomes a strain, but not too short either. I'm going to come a little bit closer. So to start off with, we should be thinking in terms of the dimensions of the stance being hip width and about the same in length. So it's like you're standing on the diagonal corners of a square. And this should give you a posture that enables you to just once again begin to move your weight. So as we transfer the weight, I'm going to just demonstrate something with a pole. So if you imagine, I talked about the center line of the body earlier, and if you imagine that pole is representing that, it's not quite accurate, but you see how when I go forwards and backwards, the pole moves with me, and my body stays in relation to that pole. It's rare that we move away from that, although we did in the previous couple of exercises. What I want to avoid doing is this, because then I start to lose the alignment of the body. And so, again, we want to think about how we generate the movement. And in this stance, and in the other stance with some exercises, although we haven't done them today, it's the feet. And once again, this can be problematic because it's almost like we forget that we have feet. So we're constantly practicing to bring our attention back. And one of the ways that we do that is rather than thinking, oh, I could go forwards, back, we go back and we give ourselves a moment just to rest on that leg. We go forwards, we give ourselves a moment just to rest on that leg. Again, finding these little still moments in the movement. And in those moments, we're able to become perhaps a little bit more aware of our posture. It's very, very ordinary, I think, very common. I think we all do it to sort of realize that your hips have gone out of line and you've lost some of that feeling or whatever. Making this a really important exercise. And it's an exercise that I learned in my first ever Tai Chi class 40 years ago. And I'm really still practicing. So it's a great exercise for your legs if you have problems with your knees. And it also begins to show us how we can move around with that sense of being grounded, of being stable. Now, as you go back this time, settle in the back foot, just raise your front toes. More of your weight will go in. So be careful of your knees. Now I've got the front foot turned out slightly. You go forwards, push your back knee forward so your heel comes up. More of your weight going straight down through your feet. Remember, if your weight goes down through your leg, you maintain stability more easily. If it goes out there somewhere, you'll be pulled forwards. Then, when you feel you've got enough weight in, say, your front leg, just draw the back foot in, push it back out to the same position, plant the foot down, move the weight. And then on the other side, okay, so try that on the other side now. So from the parallel stance, then the other foot out, step forwards, gently transferring your weight. Raising your toes and your heel. And then step in. Be very careful about the planting of your foot. And then we're going to take a few steps, either forwards or backwards, depending where you've got the space. Just with an awareness of what it's like to walk for its own sake. And then going back or forwards, whichever way it's returning. And shake out. So those are very simple exercises. Don't have to be anything complicated, but very, very useful. If you do have mobility, stability problems, they can help with that. And also, you can always do these kind of exercises. Here, I've got my right hand against a wall, and if you are a bit uncertain, it's very hard to get that sort of sense of dropping and releasing, relaxing. So having just a little bit of support can be a very useful thing to do, and help you to learn how to become more stable, to experience the dropping of your weight and how that happens, and so on and so forth. So we now add arm movements into this, and again the arms can be very distracting because instantly they absorb all our attention. We're going to do two exercises. Both fairly simple. I just show them for those who haven't seen them before. This is fisherman cast a net, and I'm moving my weight and pulling my arms through. Moving my weight, pulling my arms through. I'm not leading with my arms. It's like this from the front, and then we're going to add another exercise where we bring the hands around in a figure of eight. I go back, I turn, and the hands swing down, and then they swing up. And I go forwards and I turn, and again the hands go down, and up. So the part of the body that changes, in a sense, that produces the change, is again this area between hips and waist. So have your right foot forwards, mirror my movement. Fisherman castanet. And again, you could imagine being in water. This is a very common image in Tai Chi. It offers a sense of flow and a way of moving that is quite strong, but is also strangely sort of soft. And that's very much how we look to move in Tai Chi. Fisherman castanet. This time, when you go back, turn a little bit in the direction of the back foot, just letting your arms still swing forward and backwards. So you've still got that curve there. This time, just encouraging the curve upwards a little bit more, not too high, no higher than the shoulders, and then down. And so we've got the transfer of the weight with the turning of the center, and between them, they produce a movement that our shoulders, arms, and hands follow through this figure of eight. The body expanding, contracting, expanding, and contracting. One more time going forwards. Shake it. So change over, have your left foot forwards and start with your weight back. And again, fisherman castanet. Remember, as though you're moving through water. And again, that's quite a useful image because if you're in water, the resistance of the water would tend to hold your arms up. We probably wouldn't do that. It's too much hard work. We would tend to be pulling on our arms if we were in water. And then turning, fingers trailing behind your wrists, wrists following your elbows, elbows following your shoulders, shoulders following your hips, and your hips following the transfer of your weight. Again, one movement, one unit, body and mind working together. And then your arms just swinging up through the expansion in your upper body and then the contraction. Expanding, contracting. Try not to let your arms speed up. And then we can integrate this with stepping. So again, either forwards or backwards. I'm going to go forwards. I'll turn my front foot out. As my arms come up, I'll bring my foot in, step forwards, plant the foot, move the weight. Same thing again, making sure I've still got that feeling of alignment over my supporting leg. And if I have, and if I'm comfortable with this, you don't have to do this. I may just find that I can raise the foot a little bit. But notice that, if you do that, you may just start leaning over. So it might get a bit wobbly. So be careful with this. I'm going to change direction now. So I'm going to move into my back foot. You see, I've run out of space very quickly. And stepping back, planting the foot. Good. And shake it. Yeah, just rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Over the shoulder. Good, well, soft, firm strokes. The other side. Your hands over to your back, very gently on the lower part of your back. And around your hips. And your one up to your belly and the upper part of your chest. This is the last class of 2023 of this sort. Thank you very much to everybody who's attended through the year and who's picked up on the videos on YouTube and for all your lovely feedback. The first class of this sort in the new year will be on Thursday, the 4th of January at 4 o'clock, and then we're back to normal. If you want any more details, please get in touch. But in the meantime, have a great break. I hope you're having a good time over the festive season, however you spend it. I should look forward to catching up with you all in the new year. But for now, last exercise, sorry, think that this is Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain. And once again, we have this idea of coming back to something. The mountain can be a lovely image of these qualities of the basic posture. Still, strong, spacious. And this is where we find how, again, feeling the pull of gravity on your hips, the tendency of your body to sink, to flow down, and that little moment of stillness at the end before we begin again. So just one more. Just stand, take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. And shake out. Once again, thank you very much, everybody.